Hello, and welcome to this ninth day of Hamlet, providing some preview videos for my seniors. And I'd love to hear your thoughts as we go through the play. I do different things every day. Sometimes we workshop scenes. Sometimes there's a lot of film watching, which I don't love to do, but sometimes you have to do it. Some days it's argument and discussion. Some days it's writing. So today is a preview of Act 3, Scene 3 and 4. We've just come off the heels of the play within the play where Hamlet, in his own mind, has proven that his father's ghost was a real ghost and that the command to avenge his father's murder by his uncle was not given by the devil, that he now has to take it seriously. And he ends the previous scene with the shortest and sort of most blunt of the soliloquies. Now shall I drink hot blood and do such bitter business as hell itself would quake to look on. So we can't help in the theater, if we're watching this unfold and we don't know the play. Okay, we're in the middle of Act 3. He's just promised this again. Will he do it? Right. So that we can't help but to have that be in the center of our minds. Claudius, who's not stupid, obviously, it's sometimes easy to caricature the other characters around such a brilliant character. Hamlet arguably is the most brilliant of all characters in English literature, so it can be easy to look at, Polonius and Claudius and other characters in the play as stick figure, one-dimensional people. But Claudius is quite brilliant and realizes now that Hamlet's onto me, and he tells Rosencrantz and Guildenstern that he's sending them and Hamlet to England on a diplomatic mission. We learn later what it is, but he says he to England shall, along with you. He's going to go to England with you. Interestingly, we remember that Claudius will not let Hamlet return to Gutenberg in Act 1, Scene 2. He wants to keep Hamlet close by. But now Hamlet's dangerous in a different way, and he needs him removed. And then in a really extraordinary scene, we see Claudius praying. And it's the one moment in the play where Claudius gets, well, he thinks he's alone. Hamlet's there, and we're watching. It's almost, again, like another mini play within a play. We're watching Hamlet watch Claudius, or we're watching Hamlet listen to Claudius. And I use the Folger Shakespeare editions. It's Act 3, Scene 3, starting in line 40. And this is a really interesting speech to see Claudius thinking. We're used to seeing Hamlet think in soliloquy. We're used to seeing his mind move from thought to thought, from question to hypothetical answer. And it seems that Claudius has similar tendencies to Hamlet. He begins by saying, "My offense is rank, it smells to heaven." It's his opening line. So right away, as the audience, we see, okay, this isn't just in Hamlet's head. It's not just a ghost. The man himself is confessing to all of us that he's done this thing. He's murdered his brother to attain the crown and his wife. I want to point out that Hamlet, this is a Hamlet word, rank. He says later, rank sweat of the bed that Gertrude and he share. He says, Hamlet says in his first soliloquy, it's an unweeded garden like human life that grows to seed things rank and gross possess it merely, something like that. But Hamlet uses this word several times. So I find that interesting. Sidebar. Harold Bloom, the recently deceased professor of literature at Yale, makes a suggestion. I forget whether he sort of asserts it or he postulates it, but he says that there's a decent chance that Claudius, some of the tension in the play is that Claudius is in fact Hamlet's biological father and not Hamlet Sr. We can't know. There's no way of knowing. Language-wise, Hamlet and Claudius are much more alike than Hamlet and Hamlet Sr., and this is just a little example of that. Because Claudius is intelligent, he knows that the act of praying and the act of asking for forgiveness only makes sense if you're willing to change. He says, oh, what form of prayer can serve my turn? Now, in the middle of this confession, Hamlet realizes he has a chance. He knows his uncle's guilty, and he has a chance of killing him right here and achieving his goal. And he says, now might I do it, Pat. I can do it quickly now. Now he's praying. And now I'll do it. And so he goes to heaven. Hamlet does default to philosophy and theology when he thinks. We see it over and over again. Again, his first soliloquy, that the everlasting has fixed his canon against self-slaughter, right? He's thinking about the relation. He wants to die. But right away, the first moments we get with Hamlet alone, he's saying that it's against the decree of God to kill yourself. So Hamlet does lean in the direction of theology and philosophy. He does go to a pretty famous religious college. So here, it's clear that Hamlet doesn't only want to avenge his father's murder. He wants his father's murder and his uncle's murder to be sort of echoes of each other. And if you remember, Hamlet's father's murder was done with all of his sins still on his head. He was surprised in his death, so he didn't get a chance to go to confession and get absolution for his sins, which is why he's in purgatory being tortured. Hamlet doesn't say all that here, but he's bothered that he thinks that because he's going to kill Claudius while Claudius is praying, he's going to go to heaven. And some part of Hamlet doesn't like that. It's almost as if he needs it not to just be death for death, but he needs the stories to connect to each other as well. That's worth discussing, by the way. And then Claudius says what Mark Twain said when he said, you can't pray a lie. Claudius knows you can't trick God. And he says, my words fly up, my thoughts remain below. Words without thoughts never to heaven go. I'm not really asking for forgiveness because he says in an earlier part of this speech, I'm not willing to give up my crown and my queen. So some part of me is moved to pray, but I'm aware of the limitations. It might be interesting to read this scene closely with your reading group or class and just ask the question, what's this scene doing here? Is it so simple as like definitive proof for everyone that Claudius did this thing? More interestingly, is it a way for us to see that Claudius is a thinking person too? Not just Hamlet. Hamlet's not the only one with like thoughts and introspection. Might it be, interestingly enough, that we're seeing a Claudius-Hamlet similarity? Even if Claudius isn't Hamlet's real father, sometimes we take after like grandparents and uncles and aunts, and maybe they're similar to each other, which is why they don't like each other. I don't know. Ask yourself, what is this scene doing here? It's a really interesting scene. And then, just in a play full of iconic, amazing scenes, we remember that in the last section of the play, Hamlet is asked by Rosencrantz and Guildenstern to visit Gertrude in her closet in her private chambers. And we know Gertrude's upset. Hamlet sort of made a mockery of the play and made a mockery of the king during the play. And I think it's important with your reading group or class right now to ask, what are your predictions for this interaction? It's the only time in the entire play where Gertrude and Hamlet are together privately. The other moments are in public, which I think one thing Shakespeare does really well is he shows people's public selves and he shows people's private selves and how they're similar and different. They're just themselves here, right? The politeness is gone. We see that immediately, as opposed to like the Act 1, Scene 2, where in front of the whole court, Gertrude has to be like kind of nice and polite and deferential. They're very blunt here, but make some predictions. Like what does each one want? What does Gertrude want as this scene begins? Does she want to put her son in his place? What does she want to do? And Hamlet shows up, doesn't have to. Hamlet shows up. What does he want? Is he prepared to tell his mother everything? Or is it just he's going to like take his comeuppance and then leave? What do you think he wants? So it begins immediately in a tense way. And I kind of workshop this with students. It's really, really interesting. This is what the script looks like. Hamlet walks in, and I tell my students, if your mother asks to see you and you walk in and you say, "Mother, what's the matter?" that immediately puts both people in the room on edge, right? Hamlet, thou hast thy father much offended. Mother, you have my father much offended. So there's a couple of interesting things here that I think are worth paying attention to. Obviously, Hamlet is being Hamlet. He'll take some of the words from the previous speaker and twist them, right? That's a Hamlet trick. I want to point out thou and you, and I learned this from Ben Crystal, who's an actor, that thou is the familiar and you is the formal. So Gertrude, because she's talking to her son, says thou. In Spanish, this is like tú and usted, right? Tú is the familiar, usted is the formal. Gertrude speaks informally to her son because he's her son. Hamlet, even though he's being really sarcastic, maintains the formality of the grammar, which I don't know what to do with that, but it's there, and it might be interesting to talk about. Come, come, you answer with an idle tongue. And he does the same exact thing again. Go, go, you question with a wicked tongue. Why, how now, Hamlet? What's the matter now? That's one line of text. This is mother and son. They know each other really well. So it might sound like this. Now, mother, what's the matter? Hamlet, thou hast thy father much offended. Mother, you have my father much offended. Come, come, you answer with an idle tongue. Go, go, you question with a wicked tongue. Why, how now, Hamlet? What's the matter now? Have you forgot me? No, by the rood, not so. Those last four lines are people finishing each other's thoughts. So in this little beginning introduction, we have an immediate tone of tension set, but we also have with the thou and the you, and we also have with these last four half lines, this sense that there's tension, but these are people that know each other and who can finish each other's thoughts. And I just think that's really, really a dynamic, interesting opening. Hamlet threatens her, and she freaks out and says, how now, a rat? Hamlet, she freaks out, yells. Polonius, behind the curtain, who's spying, says, help, help. And Hamlet stabs the curtain. He thinks it's the king. This is Hamlet's big chance to kill the king doing something bad. Dead for a ducat, dead. I'm skipping a lot, but the conversation moves to, you get the dead Polonius on the ground, and you get two extremely emotionally volatile people, mother and son. He shows her a picture of her ex-husband, her deceased husband, Hamlet Sr., and a picture of Claudius, like Hamlet says, counterfeit presentment of two brothers. And he just says, how can you go from this one to this one? And I do think every time I show this that it's uncomfortable, that I have a critical mass of students, a critical number of students, I'm sure, who live with a step-parent who maybe they don't like as much as their actual parent. And that's difficult, I'm sure. And he says, have you eyes? And then, I just can't imagine saying this to my mother, oh shame, where is thy blush? Like, aren't you embarrassed at all by this? Suddenly, Hamlet's father's ghost appears. It's such an amazingly dynamic scene. Hamlet's father's ghost appears, and unlike in previous scenes, only Hamlet can see the ghost. So this ghost, my students always ask, why early on can other characters see the ghost, but now only Hamlet can? It seems like the ghost has the power to choose who to appear to. And the ghost says to Hamlet, do not forget this visitation is but to whet or sharpen thy almost blunted purpose. I want to point out that the metaphors this ghost uses are almost always military metaphors or war or murder metaphors, because he equates Hamlet's purpose. Remember, Hamlet's purpose to the ghost is to avenge his murder, right? And he says the purpose is blunted, dull, not sharp. And he says, I am here to whet the dullness of your purpose. So if your desire to avenge my murder was a knife, I want my visitation to sharpen that knife. So even though it looks like a gentle scene, even the language the ghost's father uses is the language of a man who's killed people, which I find really, really interesting. Gertrude responds logically, oh my God, you've lost your mind. She said, this is the very coinage of your brain. And Hamlet immediately says, my pulse is yours, doth temperately keep time, and makes as healthful music. It's not madness that I've uttered. Hamlet over and over again says that he's not crazy. So here the plans going forward as this scene ends. Hamlet says, "Go not to my uncle's bed," and he says some terrible things. He refers to she and his uncle sleeping together in the rank sweat of an enseamed bed. Hamlet is fixated on female sexuality and really peculiarly fixated on his mother's sexuality. I don't have a Freudian analysis of that. It's in the play, and it's interesting to think about why and why that might be. He asserts to his mother that he's not crazy. I essentially am not in madness, but mad in craft. I conjure my madness. And then, sort of pragmatically, he says, there are letters, says to his mother, there are letters sealed, and my two schoolfellows, whom I will trust as I will adders fanged. So I'll trust as like snakes with fangs, which means I won't trust Rosencrantz and Guildenstern. They bear the mandate. They must sweep my way and marshal me to knavery. Hamlet seems to know that the letter to the King of England that Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are bringing with Hamlet on their trip is meant to destroy him. And he says, let it work. For 'tis the sport to have the engineer hoist with his own petard. I'm going to make sure that the device that these guys are bringing with them, the letter, actually kills them and not me. And it shall go hard, but I will delve 1 yard below their minds and blow them at the moon. So he has a little personal piece of advice. He asserts that he's sane, and then he says sort of what he's going to do next. But it is such an unbelievably dramatic scene. Completely worth spending a class on if you can. I hope this video helps. I would, if I were to give homework, or if you wanted to journal on these scenes, I would just do a deep dive on either the King's soliloquy or the arc of this scene, this closet scene. It's endlessly interesting, and maybe consider what you expected to happen and then what surprised you. So anyway, good luck and happy reading.